Still this morning on ITV, and I'm your host from the Abuja Network Studio, Tolulope Oguntimei. I was still talking about the fallout of the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu media chat right there, where a whole lot of issues came out from that discussion. One of the things he mentioned was the fact to bring inflation down to 15%, put into consideration the current rate of inflation right now, and also the issue about borrowing. Said the borrowing not going to stop. They will continue to look at the board. Major thing are some of the things they are borrowing for. And joining me this morning to take a critical look at this are two experts when it comes to economy and also taking a look at what is really happening in the political landscape of Nigeria. I have Shola Talabi from Ogun State, is an economist and also a banker. We'll also be linking on via Zoom this morning. And also have Ali Ilyas, also an economist and a development expert. Both of them will be joining me. A wonderful morning to you, Shola. And also we have Ilyas also with me this morning. A wonderful morning to you, Ilyas. Okay, let me start with you, Shola. A wonderful morning to you, Shola.
Good morning, Tolu. How are you?
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for joining me all the way from Ogun State and also taking a look at what is really happening right there. And I'm sure you also follow up with this recent presidential media chat where the president had a whole lot of discussions concerning the economy, the political landscape, and some of the things he plans to do to 2025. But one of the major things that caught my attention was the fact that he said he's going to bring down inflation to 15% in 2025. And put into consideration the level of inflation in the country, and when we put into consideration the gross domestic product and also other many factors, how realistic is the target of president to bring down inflation to 15% come 2025? You as an economist, and a banker, what's your take on this?
Well, can you hear me, Tolu?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Good. Now, the thing there is, aspirations are good, but following through with the roadmap for actualizing your aim is the most important thing. Now, if you take our minds back, the target for this year was supposed to be 21%. Where are we? Presently, we're on 34, 35% or thereabout inflation rate. So, pronouncements don't get things done. It's activities that get things done. So, if you're going to look at it from perspective of what are the reasons why we have inflation, it's mainly cost push inflation. And I'll put everything in one basket and I'll blame it on the dollar, almighty dollar. And it's simple. This is because everything we consume, everything, all our activities are underpinned by transportation. And transportation rests on fuel. And fuel depends on the price of the dollar. And so meaning that every item, including this conversation that we are having, the clothes we have, how we got to where we are this morning, has something to do with a little bit either PMS, diesel, or some other form of fuel that is dependent on efforts. So if I was the president, or if I had the ears of the president, right now what I would say is 15% fine. But can we be a little more conservative, maybe to a 25% or thereabout? That one is actually actualizing. Now, I understand, I will try to see if I understand where the president is coming from. That the inflation we have presently are mainly because of the fiscal, partly due to fiscal tightening policies, monetary tightening policies that the CBN is undertaking. But one out tool, if you would ask, because it's no longer relevant. Our economy or our system does not respond in the desired manner to monetary tools. The last dispensation under the former CBN government, they utilized it, didn't have much success. So I would rather look at other tools like how can we bring down the cost of production. The problem is actually our Nigerian problem, PMS, FX, cost of production. How can we bring down the cost of production? We cannot have a situation where we have the NPC being at circa 27, 28%. And then the banks will now build their own cost on it. Banks will build their own cost on it, and also before they lend to SMEs and entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs make the country go down. But for me, a lot of entrepreneurs would rather just wait and watch it out rather than go into a market where they will borrow at 36, 40%. Some go as high as 50%. Some borrowing for very small scale businesses go as high as 40%. Which business are you going to do right now that will give you 40% first of all, for you to be able to pay what you're owing, then now think about margin. When all this comes into play, it is the consumer, the average consumer, you and I, are the retail outlets that get to bear this. So when we say inflation is up, we look at the CBN's rule, it's using one out monetary tools that are not really having the desired effect. Inflation has not really had the desired effect. Then also we would also look at you and I, the way we have commoditized our currency, because that is also a major problem. The currency is supposed to be a means of exchange, but by and large, that's become a commodity. USD is also supposed to be a channel for us to be able to access items from overseas. It has become something that we speculate on. It has become a commodity in itself. So for inflation to come down, the president would need to look at what are the factors that we can quickly intervene. Because if you're going to build infrastructure, if you're going to borrow, if you're going to build infrastructure that will bring things down, it is not done in 24 hours. Most factories that I know, big factories, usually take between 2 to 3 years to fully construct and set up the equipment. So what are the low-hanging fruits in terms of transportation, so that someone like myself, who spends a substantial portion of income on PMS on a monthly basis, can have an alternative that I can rely upon and then have a bit of cash flow to play with? Meaning, if we have buses that run on time, for instance, done through a PPP project or something, we can save funds. It should be about the household now. Households, how can we save funds for house and money for households that didn't have access to more income, rather than looking at inflation in itself as a major problem. If you will allow me to quickly broach for a second or two, borrowing is not bad. Borrowing is not
thought a little bit right there. Let me hear your thought a little bit. Let me hear your thought a little bit. I also have another economist on the standline on the side by talking about Aliyu. I'll come back to you. But let me have Aliyu on this. Shola talked about 25% being more realistic. Talking about the target of the president. Instead of 15%, he's targeting 2025. Knowing that it's no rocket science. For us to be at the level of innovation, there has to be an increase in our gross domestic product. And that can be also right. He talked about the fact that the lending rate it's quite difficult to achieve that. Mr. Liu, let me have your take. Do you think 25% according to Shola is more realistic than the 15% the president is targeting for 2025?
Right. I think Shola has actually give us a good background to this discussion this morning. However, I think it's the president and its handlers are overambitious to want to have 59% decrease from the 34% current inflation to 15%. I think that is over ambitious, and it's quite clear with the indices that are available to Nigerians. You recall, he actually alluded to last year that you said you want to bring inflation down to 21%, and it was pretty difficult. So sometimes we need to do our budget in a realistic manner. Though budget is a planned expenditure and income. However, those bases need to be well thought through, because it makes a caricature of us that you are doing a budget and you are saying what you know is quite not possible. So going forward, like you rightly said, we have a lot of problem that has to do with inflation, and the CBN is actually not helping. For me, having put up about 40 framework to solve Nigeria monetary problem, it still not work. And the CBN is also adamant on hawkish approach to solve inflationary problem, which is quite not a good one. Well, let me take it to the other side where you actually stopped to talk about borrowing. For me, I think I agree with him. Borrowing is never a bad thing. In fact, I am of the opinion and school of thought that we should borrow big when we are borrowing. Please, don't go borrow 1 trillion, 2 trillion. You need to borrow big. Let me give you a good example. Our deficit challenge on housing is going to be solved by 6 trillion. Why not borrow 6 trillion and solve the problem at once? Because this one that you go, look at this foreign budget that is ongoing 2024. Nigeria still go and borrow to solve the problem. So when you are borrowing, borrow big and borrow for a good projectized project. And I must also tell you that our budget is very, very small. In Nigeria as a country should be doing 100 trillion naira budget, not 49 trillion. That look at it, how much is for capital project, how much will take care of the road, take care of the education, take care of health and other social infrastructure. You see that even debt servicing is taking a whole lot from us. So for me, budget borrowing is not bad. What you are borrowing for is what is actually very, very key. So for me, this budget is over ambitious in terms of the baseline, but in terms of the budget size, I think it's very small when you compare ourselves to Brazil, to even South Africa, in Africa, to Egypt. I think we're not ready. We must work on our revenue side the more. And that's why when this tax reform actually came about, some of us said, well, it's a good way, it's a good thing if it will increase our revenue without harming or killing the small business. And there are factors of small businesses and manufacturing sector in their plan.
Okay, let me bring Shola back into discussion right now, because we talked about borrowing. Borrowing may not be a bad thing at the end of the day. But the president talked about what are we borrowing for? Infrastructural development. And Ali just mentioned the fact that if you want to borrow, let's borrow big. And also put into consideration that our budget, 49 point something trillion, at this level, put into consideration our population, may not really be enough. When you look at the breakdown of the budget, the amount is budgeted for infrastructure development, I think it's between 4 point something or 2 point something trillion. Do you think our budget is small? And do you think the project we want to embark on for a country of over 200 million people, are we doing enough when it comes to population and expectation going to 2025?
Thank you very much, Tolu. The thing there is this: it's not even about the 4 trillion naira that is our portion to it. It's about what percentage of that 4 trillion would we have been able to fully implement in a good manner from this period, if God willing, if we have this conversation by 2025. So it is not even about budget. If you budget 1 trillion, 2 trillion, 3 trillion, whatever it is you budget, how far with the implementation? Because it's the implementation of the long run that sees that the infrastructure is on ground and available for people to use. Now, the other note of caution that we need to tread on is this: how many of our infrastructural projects are able to pay for themselves? How many of them are politically motivated? We need to begin to look at things from that perspective. If I'm building a road, for instance, can that road maintain itself without my needing to borrow to renovate the road for subsequent cycles? If I have railway, for instance, why am I declaring free transportation for a certain period for a loan that has not been paid? That most likely the infrastructure itself would have needed overhaul by the time the loan itself would have matured for payment. So if we're going to build a country, we need to begin to look at it from a business perspective. From a business perspective, it makes a lot more sense. If the trains run on time, Tommy, we will reduce costs. If I had an opportunity of a bus stop, of getting to the bus stop, and within a period of 20, 30 minutes, I'm able to get a bus that will get me safely to my destination, I'll dump my car, and then I'll get to save a lot more money. So all these things are intertwined. The government budget, not bad. Borrowing itself is not bad because it allows you access funds that you do not have today for infrastructure that would impact your well-being and that of your citizens tomorrow. So if we're saying we're borrowing, it's not even about the borrowing. We need to borrow big, like Mr. Ali said. We need to borrow big so that we do this thing. Let's just do this thing once and for all. However, when we borrow, how far with our implementation? Have we ever recorded 70% implementation at the end of any financial year? I think I'll drop and allow Mr. Ali to speak.
Just before I go to Mr. Ali, Shola, let me take you on this. Right. We talked about, the president talked about gross domestic product. And one of the major challenges we also face is the fact that some of the major companies that we used to have in the 70s or 80s are nowhere to be found. Then how do we boost our gross domestic product? The textile industry is non-existent. The Dunlop of those days that produces tires, Michelin, are no longer there. We talked about bringing down the inflation to 15%. How are you going to achieve that? Is it possible to be able to do all these things within 1 year that the president is targeting? Or the president should just realize that this will not be possible, and it should not be deceiving Nigerians with the possibility of bringing down inflation, because we know that the companies that may help us to bring this to down are not there. What's your take on this?
Well, Tolu, I think when we refer to the good old days, we need to do it with a note of caution and hold ourselves to account for the failures of that good old period. That was the era of the import substitution strategy. But however, there was a failure in focus. Failure in focus in that it was not an export-oriented import substitution strategy. So companies took FX, produced for the home country, and then at the end of the day, the points where we got the FX from are not replenished. If today the federal government decides that, okay, we're going to open up, we're good for business. Textile mills coming, steel rolling mills coming, we will give you access to FX when you manufacture it. However, when we give you access to FX to bring in raw materials, you must reciprocate by making sure that you export a portion, an appreciable portion of what you have produced to replenish what has coming. It must be cast, if you may allow me to use that word, it must be cast in blood. When we refer to those good old days, they produced, they generated employment, they did so many things, country was nice and everything, but the focus itself was flawed in that we were producing for the home country. Exports was not really the mainstay of the economy. Now, when we talk about GDP as of today, when we deflate our GDP, this is a 10-year period, we're nowhere. And then when we now convert it into FX, we're doing far worse than we did years back. So the only way to go is that we either export or die as a country. So I would say the budget is ambitious. The budget is not unactualizable. In the short term, there are things we can do. For instance, let me bring it back now. We have food problem, food inflation. If you check the inflation, the consumer price index, the food portion of the basket of the CPI is a major headache to everyone. Now, we've had 15 months or thereabout, 15 to 17 months under the new administration. Now, most of the food items that we consume in Nigeria are within the 6 to 8 month gestation window. We've not done enough. So if we're going to start, we start now again to try and make life better for the people. We start from agriculture. From agriculture, we go to the value addition chain. We address the value addition chain because we have a problem with processing and preservation. So when we think the crops are in season, we have them cheap. When they are out of season, we have a major problem. We have storage silos all over the federation that we're not using so that we can hedge against inflation. However, that being said, our GDP is nowhere near where it's supposed to be. We all have to agree. But there are a lot of other factors that I know the president, the fairness to the president, when you hear him speak, the passion is there, the aim and aspiration, everything like this. Yes, we are geared towards making Nigeria a better place for everyone to live. However, we can take people who are alive to enjoy the future that we're all talking about. Thank you.
I must say thank you to you, Shola. Let me quickly wrap this up because time earlier said, let me get to Ali right there on the issue before we wrap up the program. But I will say thank you to you for linking up. But let me get to Ali. Ali, just before we wrap up this segment, we listen to some of the things that the president talked about and also how he hoped that he can be able to bring in more investors into the country. He went to Brazil, spoke with some people there, and he was able to bring about $2.5 billion investment into Nigeria. But one major thing that seems to be at the front burner also has to do with the fact that what the president is trying to do to make the country but when you put into consideration, he said the issue about inflation is never going to do a control pricing where we determine what the price, especially with what is happening in the market right there. Do you agree with the president when it comes to controlling the price that it's going to leave it to market forces to determine? Just quick one from you.
All right. I think our major problem is leaving everything to market price, which is not done in any way. You recall that we actually fall into this major problem not because of foreign subsidy removal, but because of a flotation of naira, which is willing buyer, willing seller, and that's the major problem that we're actually having. There's no country in the world that you go, you determine what you have been to some countries. When you get there, for you to change money, you may have to bring your passport, you may have to commit a lot of things for them to know that this is actually what you're actually doing. So for me, I think for presidents to actually succeed and do well, all what he has uttered, I want him to actually follow those things. One of it was that he declared state of emergency on food security as at July 2023. Over 1 year now, we have not seen any difference. He's not making sure that what he said is actually following it. If we are doing agriculture and a mass agriculture, as it were, we would have moved from where we are now. He also said there is going to be alternatives to petroleum product, which is CNG. I have converted my car to CNG. But I can tell you, I find it difficult to go to a filling station to buy. You know why? You have to do away with 3 hours for you to fill your gas. That's a serious problem. That means there's a serious queue. So all these things are one in terms of bringing infrastructure, foreign direct investment, no investors will come to a climate that doesn't work well. Look at our MPR. The borrowing, the loans, the interest rate.
Mr. Leo, I will say thank you to you. Time really friend. I really appreciate you and Shola Talabi joining us this morning. I will thank you give us the opportunity, but I must say thank you to you for joining us this morning. So much really to really talk about, but time really friend. We'll quickly link up with our network news.